Welcome back, guys. I'm Dr. Chris Erskine, and today we're going to continue talking about the expansion and the contraction, the Great Depression, all the stuff that we talked about in the last lesson, the politics of boom and bust. So, the last lesson we talked about this terrible Great Depression economic contraction. The question is that President Hoover wants to know, how does the government respond? What should the government do? And if you look at this first slide, there's two theories. And these are theories that you really should know, especially if you're going to study business or economics in college. These two theories you need to know. You'll study about these again later when we get to the business classes of Top Up. But the first one is Keynesian. Should the government respond by the Keynesian theory? Or should it respond with the classical? Now the Keynesian is this. The private sector, the business, if you own a business, you're in the private sector, is interested only in profit. And if you're uninterested only in profit, you're not going to invest in things that risk your profit, which means you're going to cut jobs if you need to in a bad economy because you're hoping to save money and make a profit. So this is a negative impact on an economy. So if you have a bad economy, a private business is going to be worse for the economy, because it's going to act in its own interests rather than economic interests. And so this is what Keynesian economics believes, that the government should offset these private businesses by pushing money, government money into the economy, and also trying to create jobs and more regulations of these private sector jobs. The other response is classical. Now, the government should stay completely hands-off, should do nothing. The market will regulate itself because competition is essential. You have two companies, they should fight it out, see which one has a better product for the American people, see which one has a better price. Don't let the government pick the winners and losers, let the people decide. And that's what the classical theory is. On the next slide, and Hoover basically, now Hoover does believe in some Keynesian theory, but he also believes in some classical theory. But what Hoover does with his money, with his pushing the money into the economy, is he mostly targets the larger businesses rather than the people. And as a result of this, what we have is a bunch of poor people, and they can't afford their homes anymore. They get kicked out of their homes, and so unemployment goes up. And their property and their real estate are taken away. And where do they go live? Well, they go live in parks. They go live in slum places in towns. And if you look at the next slide, you can see this family living in a tent. And these are called Hoovervilles. A ville is a town, and they were named after President Hoover. There were Hoovervilles all over the country. And the next slide, we see another group of shanty homes in a Hooverville. And we see also on the next slide. In the next slide, we see a man standing at his door. He's living in a very small shack. In the next slide, we see some shanty homes in the middle of a public park. This public park is in New York City. If you've been to New York City, you'll know that this is Central Park. Central Park today is still it's the largest public park in the city in the world. The next slide, we see these Hoovervilles in the snow, still in New York City. And then the next slide, we see the poor people versus the prosperity of the big city behind them. And then we see a slide where today we can see Central Park, and it's just this massive park in the middle of the city. And then finally, we see a picture of a woman who lived in Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, there was the Depression, of course, but they also had a drought. It didn't rain very much for about 10 years. And they had over-farmed the area, and so there was a lot of loose dirt and not enough moisture to keep it, to keep the rain, not enough grass either, to keep the dust from picking up and blowing in the dry drought for 10 years. And so this woman was just a picture of her and her children, very famous picture in America taken during the Depression. And so look at the next slide, and we can see this picture of the American map. And this is the election of 1932. And FDR is running against Hoover. And Hoover doesn't stand a chance. Almost the entire country votes Democrat. We have only a few states up in the northeastern United States that vote Republican. And so Roosevelt wins, and he understands this victory as a way, as a mandate, as a permission slip from the American people to do something hard and do something drastic, do something to save the country. And so that's what he's going to do when he comes into office. And he comes into office on March 4 of 1933, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next lesson. We'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.